Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. My name is Dana, and my guest today is Scott Singer. Hello, Scott. How are you?
I'm awesome, other than sitting in another airport lounge.
Well, we'll make this quick and painless. So, we have a great topic, though. I think this is going to be very helpful to people. So, it is things an assessor might ask. And this is going to be very valuable information because people might not know exactly what's going to happen or how the assessment process goes. So, the first question is going to be, how did you prepare for your DIBCAC assessment in order to avoid questions?
So, first of all, having not been assessed by anybody else other than DIBCAC, the DoD, that's my perspective right now, and then how I'm trying to help others get ready for their assessments. So, probably the best way to prepare for a DIBCAC assessment is to really know that you've gone through your system security plan, and that means more than once.
Mhm.
Okay. And it is also very good to have others read it, not because, like anything, right? When you start looking at something too closely for too long, it starts to look great, or
Mhm.
you, or you miss things, or you just get tired of looking at it, right?
Mhm.
And I also noticed that I wrote questions or answers for my plan much better at the beginning of the plan than the end of the plan because I think I
Yes.
started to get a little burnt out working through it. And so sometimes it's good to kind of start working backwards and forwards and from the middle and just do it a bunch of different times. So that's really a key thing is to really kind of work through that. And then what I really did was I sat down and I put together a traceability matrix. And I came from medical device where we used to always have to trace a system requirement to a test that we've done and an expected outcome and make sure we got the outcome we expected. Okay. So I used that mentality or methodology and applied it here to getting through my assessment. And I went control by control or practice, depending on what you like better. And I looked through the assessment objectives. Again, there's 320 of those, not just 110 controls, right? So we went through and made sure that we had objective evidence, or some people call them artifacts, being interchangeable terms like controls and practice. And I made sure that I had evidence for each one of those items, okay? Or I could get evidence for each item. And that's another way to make sure that to do just a quality check in your whole system security plan to make sure that you've got the things in place. And so it really requires some detailed preparation and some diligence to make sure you're ready for this assessment.
All right. Well, that's good. And for them to start with the SSP and go through it a few times, have somebody on the outside look at it, that
Mm.
makes a lot of sense. That's very, very good. All right. So that's good. Okay. So now, during the initial scoping call with DIBCAC, what did they ask?
So in my situation with Cyber Nines, there was an initial call, and really that call is for them to decide, are we ready for the full assessment? Okay. And I just sent them a few documents up front, and then the call was for them to have the ability to talk through them and have me explain, what the heck I was thinking. So I had to send them the CMMC assessment scope for level two, and that's really a key document, and that tells you what is in your assessment scope and what's out of scope, what's in scope, what's a security protection asset, what is a contractor risk managed asset if you have those, and how they relate to each other. So that's step one. So they wanted to see that. Then they asked for an asset inventory, and they wanted to know which assets were CUI assets. And in our case, we had Azure Virtual Desktops that were assets that we had to label. And we also had contractor risk managed assets, which were our Dell, well, it could be any brand, but it was our thin clients that we used to access the environment. So we listed those out in a document and we provided that to them. And they also wanted a network architecture. So we have kind of a funny internal name we use for the assessment scope. We call it the Barney diagram. Think like the big purple dinosaur. It's kind of a simple version, right? And we also then have to get a little more, geeky and get down to the network architecture. And that's where it's kind of a traditional network architecture diagram that shows, the whole flow of CUI in and out of our system, and how what are the sources, the destinations, and they wanted to see that. And I'm trying to think back. And then right after we had provided those documents, and before we had the assessment scope, I sent them the system security plan too. And so that was really the main things that they asked for. And then when we got into the scoping call, I had to go through and just walk through those. Now I want to kind of share something that happened to me in that scoping assessment call, is that originally we wanted to have 1099 employees do the assessments for us with OSCs, organizations seeking certification. And we were going to just have them use their desktops or laptops and then log into our AVDs, Azure Virtual Desktops in the cloud, and use that environment, okay? And we thought that was going to be fine. Well, DoD didn't like that. And so what we ended up having to do was get, we went back and forth and discussed, what's the issues. We turned off cut, copy, paste, and print. And so you really can't do anything. But they really wanted those assets to be company owned regardless. And they wanted to make sure that there was virus software running and that there was firewall and patching, even though I considered those endpoints to be out of scope, okay, because we were going into a virtual environment and that endpoint couldn't really do anything. But so we ended up defaulting to just make life easy for us to go to a thin client that couldn't do anything.
Okay, well, that's a good experience to share with everybody, because that is one of the questions people are wondering is, what environment are you going to be working in with the OSCs? So that was very, very helpful that you mentioned that. Now, let me just ask you real quick, as far as everything that they talked about on the call, like let's just take the asset inventory. Was that a form you had provided beforehand? Was there anything that they asked you on the call that wasn't related to a form or a document that they had asked for?
Are you having a hard time finding new customers? A lot of folks just like you in the IT and cybersecurity space are in the same situation. And they have embraced a new opportunity to get new clients. They're doing this by growing their online presence and maximizing the power of LinkedIn. How, you ask? I have a tried and tested method called my Cyber Social Program. I myself have been on LinkedIn and now have over 3.5 million LinkedIn views, and over on YouTube, I have over 750,000 video views. So I can show you exactly how I have done that so that you can promote your organization and become the authority in your industry. And the best part is, I've done all of this organically without one paid ad. You don't need to waste your money over on Google with pay-per-click ads. Now's the time to establish yourself. Look around. The competition isn't doing it. This is your time to shine online before they do. So if you're ready to start your online journey and future-proof your business, please, down below, click the link and schedule a time for us to have a 45-minute call where I can review the exact methodology of the Cyber Social Program. You can also click below to see some of my masterclasses, which will give you quick little snippets of a couple of things you can do right away on LinkedIn that will help with your profile. I hope to see you and hear from you soon.
No, I mean, they got into then scheduling and how the whole, assessment was going to work, towards the end. But no, they really didn't, throw me. The only curveball was what I just discussed.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. So people, if they ask you for forms, documentation, whatever, that's what the conversation is going to be about. So that's good to know. Okay. All right. Our next question. Are NFO, non-federal organizations, controls asked during an assessment? Did you get asked about anything else? We'll start with this one first.
Sure. So if people aren't really kind of familiar with NFO controls, there's an appendix at the end of NIST 800-171 that lists those controls. And what basically NIST and DOD is saying is that when they scoped 853 to moderate, those NFO controls were considered something that companies would already have in place. So they just, you know, said that they weren't going to assess them as part of 800-171. They assume you have those in place. And so here's where it gets a little tricky, right? Because, okay, so what does that mean? And there's been a lot of discussions about NFO controls if you look out in LinkedIn and kind of the internet and hunt around. But the bottom line is that they are fair game in an assessment, but they don't get asked unless they're digging into something. Okay, and I'll give you an example. In my case, they were digging deep into training during the assessment, and I did not have a training matrix set up, kind of like an Excel spreadsheet that says this person is required to do these 6 training items and when they are supposed to do them. Okay, that kind of falls more into the realm of NFO space kind of things. However, they did go ahead and want me to have that. And even though it wasn't part of, the NIST control, 3.2.1, 2.2, and 2.3, they did want that extra information. And I had to go fill that out. And they gave me the opportunity to do that during the assessment, fill one of those out and fix that.
So that's good to know. So they did let you go and create that document and put it in place.
They did, and I know there's, you're going to kind of follow up with another question on this a little more, but so I'll wait for that. We can kind of continue.
All right, so let's jump into that. So did you get asked about anything outside of NIST controls?
Well, yeah, here, the NFO controls here, they did ask about related to the training piece, but no, they actually stayed pretty true to going down through each control. It's just a matter of how I answered the control, whether it would pull something in to help use as evidence that, that they would have liked to see, for example. If they felt what I had given them wasn't sufficient, there's the term, is the evidence both adequate and sufficient to meet the control? Okay. They kind of felt that what I was providing wasn't sufficient enough to cover the scope of what they were looking for. So I had to pull some different things in. That's the best way I can kind of answer that. It's a little hard to know where they're going to go a bit, so it is worthwhile to understand the NFO controls and what's there. But it doesn't mean that you have to knock yourself out and get into the details of having a full written explanation for each one of those.
Okay, that's good to know because there's enough other stuff to worry about.
There's enough.
All right, so were you allowed to make any changes to your system or documentation during the assessment in order to pass a control?
The answer is yes, and here's a big, when in the Navy, when there was the teacher was going to tell you this is going to be on the exam, and he or she would stamp their foot, kind of pay attention. Well, right here is the DIBCAC would let you make a change to documentation and then fix it and provide it the next day, the update. They won't let you make changes to your system. Okay, so let me give you a better example of that. So let's say I said in the system, it said that the virtual desktops would terminate after 12 hours. Okay. But then in my system security plan, I had written 6 hours for the session termination time. Mm-hmm. They would let me go back and change and fix my system security plan to match what I have written in the environment. They wouldn't let me go and change the environment to 6 hours. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so is that a good general rule for people to understand?
I believe so. I mean, that was my experience. I don't know if that's how it's been done in other assessments, but that's what I experienced.
Okay, that's good. All right. So here's our next one. What are some key lessons learned that you could pass on to others to help them pass an assessment?
So if we go back to what I was talking about when we started in that traceability matrix, so I actually sent all of the documentation, all the screenshots, everything related to my quality kind of check on my whole environment. I sent that all as evidence to DIBCAC, and it was, I want to say, 263 actual files I sent to DIBCAC. So the goal is to just make them understand that you don't want to give them a reason to fail you, right? So I was trying to say, hey, it's all here. Here's all the screenshots. All you really need to do is come in and do some spot checking and look at my environment, but it's all buttoned up, ready to go. And honestly, I was able to get through the whole assessment in a day and a half.
Well, it sounds like you were very prepared ahead of time.
So I know that's quicker than a lot of people have had that experience. And again, it does really depend on the assessment team that you get. I know that they're, as time goes by, they're getting better and better at being consistent on how they approach this. And, you know, I was one of the early kind of groups or companies to go through. But, you know, it really is important to be prepared up front and be ready to go and have gone through each control and understood what is the appropriate evidence to prove that this control is being met. And if you do all that, you're going to pass.
And, you know, if you were prepared and really put a lot of thinking into it ahead of time, like you did, and sending all that stuff and everything, that says a lot about the rest of everything. You know what I mean? It shows exactly what you know what you're talking about. You're very prepared, very organized. And so then there's a lot of stuff that they can kind of quickly go through. And if you do get stumped on something, they're going to know that this is somebody that has their act together and understands what the intention was here. So to have that discussion may be a little bit easier than if everything is a little bit of a mess and then all of a sudden they stumble on something that really is kind of questionable. I don't think that's going to go very well.
No, I agree. Again, it's you're right. It's making sure that they have the evidence they need to be able to pass you, because let's be realistic here. They do want the companies to get through this. Okay, there's not an incentive for them to fail a company, because, you know, they're trying to grow this whole ecosystem to be ready for next year to start doing assessments. So,
okay, well, perfect. It sounds like somebody's flight's taking off right now. This was really, really good. I appreciate your time. I know you stopped and took time out of the airport to spend with me to answer these questions, and this was really, really helpful. So thank you very, very much.
Oh, of course. Nice talking to you again, Dan.
All right, you take care, and everybody else, will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.